Hey guys, welcome to Melanin United. On this video, we're going to be talking about Ethiopia and the Tigrayan TPLF People's Liberation Army, and the peace agreement that just happened about a week ago in Pretoria, South Africa. We made a video about this a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, about they're starting to have a peace agreement, the Ethiopian government and the Tigrayan rebels in South Africa and stuff, and we're hoping for good outcomes coming out of this peace talks and stuff. And seems like there was pretty good outcome. The only thing I was annoyed about is, like I said, why does the Europeans need to bring their military? And I'm talking which, and when I say Europeans right now, it was an American military plane. Why does the European need to bring their military plane to come take out the TPLF delegations to bring them to South Africa? They needed to come to Ethiopia with their military plane. So that, remember, like I said, that shows you who was behind TPLF. My thing is, why couldn't, like, if the Ethiopians, like, and I'm proud of Ethiopia. Abiy Ahmed, his whole government, and just the Ethiopian people in general. I'm proud, so proud how they haven't backed down from the Europeans, and they called them out. Which we more of us Africans and Black people, melanated people around the world, we need to call them on their bullshit. Okay, but my thing is, instead of the European planes coming into Ethiopia and lifting the Tigrayan delegations, why couldn't the Ethiopian government say, what's it called? No, the TPLF, we will assist them in taking train, bus, taxi, helicopter, whatever, to the next neighboring country. Like, let's say not Eritrea, because Eritrea doesn't mess with the European. You could say Uganda or Somalia, because right now the Somalian president is in the pockets of the Europeans. But so why couldn't the TPLF, they be go on a plane to Somalia or Uganda or somewhere, and then the European military plane can come pick them up? I wouldn't trust them coming to Ethiopia after all this stuff that's happened and how they're the ones behind all of it. But anyways, to teach one each one, whatever. Um, yeah. So South Africa, they had the peace talk, and again, I was annoyed seeing, like, it was like I've heard the Nigerian, it was the between the peace talks, the leaders that were there to facilitate the peace talks was former president of Kenya Uhuru Kenyatta, and then the former Nigerian president. He was there, and those are actually some good Africans. So they're mediating the peace talks and all that, and it should have happened a while ago. So the Europeans were stalling the Tigrayan TPLF army so they can try to get better deals and all that. Um, I was annoyed when I seen the video of the peace talks, because the former Nigerian president said, African problems, African solutions," was what we need. That's perfectly well said. It couldn't have said it any better. But I was just annoyed when the camera went around the room. Look, where it was Ethiopian, Nigerian, South Africans, everything. Right, it was just Africans in general. And then I seen a European sitting there, like, what are you doing there? Do you see any Africans going to sit in the peace talks between Ukraine and Russia? It's a serious question, guys. Do you see any black person sitting in any of their peace talks? So what are they doing here? They're trying to perpetrate the agenda and the narratives that, oh, that we need them to have peace and all that. Like, get out of here with that. Anyways, so the peace talks seem to have been good, and they've seemed to agree to have peace. And remember, the Ethiopian government has tried to make peace so many different times with this rebel group that's controlled by the Europeans. So many different times they try to make peace, and they've always denied it and kept fighting, kept fighting. Every time the Ethiopians trying to develop the country economically. So now, supposedly, there's an agreement for the peace talks. So now they're agreeing, and no fighting should be going on. So now we know, if we see fighting, we know what's happening. Um, my thing is, if if Ethiopia is trying to develop, or they're making new projects, new megas projects for using their resources and stuff like that, working with other African countries beside them, and just working on new projects, economically developing, and then out of nowhere, the TPLF attacks the Ethiopian military, or they starts fighting again, then you know what's going on. You know that's, like, I already proved to you guys and showed you guys how every time, first it started with a dam, and like when the Ethiopians were continuing on building the dam, no matter what Egypt said, no matter what the U.S. said, no matter what Sudan said. the Sudan that's controlled by the Arabs, not South. Um, yeah, and then after that, they didn't listen to no bullying from the Europeans, and they continued their damn. Then the TPLF out of nowhere attacks them. Like, come on. So if they're working on new projects and stuff like that, and then the TPLF attacks them, you know what's going on. That just shows you the Europeans do not want us to develop or be independent. They want us to depend on them, and they're mad that Ethiopia is actually doesn't need them. So, um, yeah, the peace talks good and all that stuff. And another problem I have with the peace talks is now, now under their umbrella, the so-called humanitarian aids, now they're gonna be allowed into Ethiopia. That's my problem. I think like the Ethiopian government got a lot of good deals too out of it. Because the TPLF, remember, they wanted to have their own region or their own country or be sovereign. Like, no, that's what the European does. Just like they try to push in Somaliland and all those places. They try to just divide and carve up little regions in these countries like Ethiopia or Somalia, and then call them something else and have the people there, so then the people can be controlled by them and cause conflict when they need, steal resources when they need. So no, they like to divide and conquer us instead of us being a unit country and stuff like that. Unity country, uniting and being a country. They want to divide certain fractions so they can control those fractions, and to a wider extent control the country with its resources. And so so my thing is, when there was the humanitarian aids, when it was being allowed into Ethiopia, the Tigrayan region. And remember, we're not talking about the Tigrayan citizens, the normal citizens, because yes, the Ethiopian government's even been helping the citizens, bringing food and stuff to the Tigrayan people, and all that. And it's tough because when you got these rebels puppet rebels that controlled by the Europeans shooting at you and all that, when you're trying to bring food to the people there, the innocent people, what are you gonna do? And then when they allowed the so-called humanitarian aids come from the West, um, somehow the TPLF army got more fuel for gas for their tanks. They got more weapons and all that. That's what I mean. Anytime they let their little umbrellas of names of organizations that they use, like I said, World Health Organization, controlled by them. They use this stuff to go into countries, and their NGOs, their humanitarian crisis, their human rights groups, human rights activists, the humanitarian aids, the UN, all these organizations, these groups and stuff are all controlled by them, and these are tools that they use to try to control these countries or try to destabilize. So when the Ethiopian government was allowing humanitarian aid go to the Tigrayan region, what was happening? The Tigrayan rebels were stealing the oil and getting weapons. And I wouldn't even call it stealing, because the humanitarian aids brought those weapons and oil and food to the Tigrayan rebels instead of the people on purpose. Because that's what the European told them to go take it to. So, and then the Ethiopian government after that stopped the humanitarian aid because they're like, hey, these people are getting more weapons, they're getting strategy and all that kind of stuff. Because remember, they monitor our country, they monitor us, they spy on us from space, they spy on us from all these places, okay? They use all these technologies to spy on us, wherever we are in the world. But, yeah, so when they're allowing humanitarian aid at first to come in, it just so-called happened to get in the wrong hands. Instead of the Tigrayan people, it goes to the rebels. Guns, food, oil, and all that. So, and then the Ethiopian government cut that shit off. They stopped that and said, no, that's not happening, because you're just getting advantages to destabilize Ethiopia more and stuff. So when that happened, the Europeans were so mad. They're like, Ethiopia's committing human rights violation. Why are they not letting any humanitarian aid? They're starving children. They're doing this. They're doing that. And that's their defense mechanism too. You know what I mean? To try to say, what's the Ethiopian government doing? They're not even letting humanitarian aids come in, because humanitarian aid sounds so like peaceful, and it's, come on guys, it's food and all that. When it's these organizations these tools that they use to fund their war and stuff, to continue their destruction of us. But so once they stopped letting the humanitarian aids, they started crying. The Europeans started crying foul and saying Ethiopia. They kept repeating Ethiopia should allow humanitarian aid coming to Tigray and all that. and stuff like that. Even Sudan, when Sudan sent a drone and stuff like that, or they tried to send some not South Sudan, North Sudan, one's controlled by Arab right now. Or North Sudan tried to send so-called humanitarian aids, and remember, these are orders from the Europeans. They sent so-called humanitarian aids to the Tigrayan region. It was weapons, and the Ethiopian army shot down that drone and shot down the so-called aids that they were supposed to be bringing, and all that. So all these aids that they keep talking about, it ends up being weapons or fuel for these criminals, these puppets that they're using, that the Europeans are using. So that's my problem now. After all that, after all we just been through with them sending aid and us finding out that, hey, they're actually assisting these people with more fuel, with more weapons and stuff like that, more ammunition, all that stuff, more drones, all that kind of stuff. After we went through all that, and then we cut them off from coming, and then once we cut them off, the war was much easier, was it not? We started advancing, beating the Tigrayan people and stuff like that, and the Europeans started crying foul and about the AIDS and all that stuff like that. But now through the peace talks, I don't know exactly what, but I'm pretty sure the Ethiopian government was saying no, the Tigrayan region cannot be a sovereign state, sovereign country. It's a part of Ethiopia, which it always was. No, it's not. It's not going to be a breakaway region. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are not going to pull that stuff out. So, and they couldn't get that to work. The Europeans, they wanted something big so they can, they want to control the Horn of Africa. And to control the Horn of Africa, you need to control Ethiopia because that's the biggest country there, right? So, they want something out of it. They want Tigray to be sovereign so then they can keep bringing weapons or stuff like that. Or they just want something good out of it. So, the Ethiopian government will not allow that to happen, which is what they shouldn't. But I think the Europeans said, okay, well, at least they told to the Tigrayan rebels to say, okay, well, they're not really getting anything that they want. At least let them get humanitarian aid access. And you can, of course, the Ethiopian government can't say no to everything because it will seem like, okay, they don't want peace, they just want everything, you know what I mean? Which, that's what the European does, put you in predicaments like that where it makes you look like, you know what I mean? It's just, they're so manipulating devils. But yeah, the humanitarian. So they said. So that's the least thing that that they can do. Like, you know what I mean. But it's very bad. But so they're allowing humanitarian aid access. So I'm just saying, if the Tigrayan people start getting more weapons out of nowhere, or they start getting more sophisticated, more sophisticated weaponry and access, or so much oil and stuff like that, we know what's going on. We know it's the Europeans supporting them with all these stuff. And if they start getting all these weapons and then start fighting the Ethiopian people or getting sophisticated weapons like bombs and stuff, then we know. So that's my only problem with that, is allowing their so-called humanitarian aids to come in, because we know all this stuff is really just them trying to stick their head into Ethiopia and you know what I mean, interfere in our internal affairs. But yeah, anyways guys, thanks for listening to this. Like, comment, subscribe.